If you feel like you're stuck closing multiple deals every month and you feel like you're at your wits end and there's not enough time in the day to get your things, everything that you need to get done, it might be time to hire some help. So in this episode, we're going to dive into our best practices for hiring talent, virtual assistants specifically. And both of us have hired and fired dozens of people over the years. And so we're just going to dive into that. I'm Jasper Cool here with my dad, Mark Cool. And this is Wholesaling the Cool Way. And like I said, on this episode, we're going to go over hiring. We're also going to go over our week in business, victories, challenges, and breaking down a closed deal from the past week, each of us. So let's just dive right in. We're going to jump into the hiring conversation. And I think it'd be good to start out with kind of where you like to find people to hire, some of your best practices for maybe putting together a job posting, some of the things you look for in your applicants, and then we can both kind of riff off of those points.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great framework to talk about it with. Um, for me, yeah, I mean, I'll just say off the top, like I was that person. I was the person who was doing everything myself, solopreneur. Acquisitions, disposition, transactions, trying to keep track of all the paperwork or sheets within Google, all that stuff, and just couldn't keep it going. Uh, and so I had my brother helping me part time, but he had a full time job. But when I hired my first VA, it was a deal. It was a game changer, not a deal breaker, a game changer. And, it's and then when I realized I could do that, and so it is a mindset. I think there's a mindset piece here of like, oh my God, I can't afford to do this, or I don't have enough work to keep somebody busy. And I'll just say that if that's your objection, like I don't have enough work to keep somebody busy, well, every time I've hired somebody, it just becomes clear the next person I need to hire and the next person I need to hire and what else can be handed off, right? So
Hmm.
you will figure out that you have enough work to keep somebody busy, and you can also hire somebody part-time to start or project base if it feels like a risk. Hey, I'm going to just have you do this one project, and then you're not committing to a long-term thing or a bunch of money. You're just testing somebody out with one project. Or you can say, I've got 10 hours a week for you or 20 hours a week for you, and go from there. So I would just say like that mindset piece is really important of the who not how, or the you know E-Myth, or what's the other one, the Dan Martell one.
Yeah, buy back your time.
All back your time. Those mindset pieces are really important. So aside from that, like, what are you going to pay people? You can pay people as low as $4 an hour. I think maybe even less in some cases. You probably don't want to go less, but you can get really good quality help for 4 or 5, $6 an hour. And it's amazing the quality of people you can find. And so where do I go? My go-to has been Online Jobs PH. That's been really good for me. I post stuff up there, and I usually get pretty good candidates for a variety of positions in the real estate investing space: acquisitions, disposition, admin, um, you know, whatever else, web design, various things. I've also used Upwork, which is good. I don't like Upwork's user interface as much, and I find it to be just kind of all over the place for me. And and I don't get great response on there all the time to jobs. Sometimes I get good response, sometimes I don't. Um, Jasper, I guess you can speak more to things like Somewhere, but I have tried them. I signed up with them. I did get some good candidates with them, but nobody I wanted to hire after looking at probably 15 or 20 candidates from them. So,
Hmm.
and they charge a fee. So Online Jobs PH is like $60 or $70 a month now, but you can cancel anytime. So you could sign up for 1 month and then get all your candidates and then cancel. And then you can sign back up the next time you need to hire somebody. So you don't need to keep an ongoing subscription to that. Um, my operations manager also uses Facebook groups, and I haven't really gotten into that much, but there are Facebook groups for VAs, people in Latin America or people in the Philippines who are looking for work. So you can find people through Facebook groups, and that's a free way to do it. I don't know, I guess you just have to go there in there and muddle around, or you can ask me if you want more info, and I can probably get it from my operations guy and share. So what else did you say? Where we hire people, and what am I missing?
Yeah, I think that's a good start. Maybe just like some of the things that you look for when you're going through your applicants of people that are applying for your jobs.
Yeah. And you also said how to do job descriptions, which is a good one too. And one of the things I've done with job descriptions is, we have Chat GBT now, so you can use Chat GBT, and that's really helpful. You can give it the basics of what you want, and then you can tell it to help you round it out. And so I've been using that. And the other sort of hack for posting ads is to try and speak to the person that you want for the role. So like if you have a certain personality type that you want for the role, tell ChatGPT that, or if you're writing it yourself, speak to that person. Like if you're hiring somebody who's a closer or a salesperson, then you want to speak to somebody who's like, do you enjoy, engaging with customers and negotiating, and do you enjoy the challenge of sales and bringing home the deal or getting the contract, like that kind of stuff. You put that kind of language in there. If you're looking for an admin person, it might be more like you are the type of person who enjoys order and you like to dot your I's and cross your T's, and you like, you are satisfied when everything is in a line and things are flowing smoothly, whatever. You want to speak the language of the person you're trying to hire. And
Hmm.
so I use that. And then when I'm screening people, I usually put a couple things in there to weed people out. And so I'll just put in like, don't respond, don't, and on online jobs PH, for some reason you have to show your email, but I just say like, if you respond to my email, it will not be read, please respond only in this platform. And then if people respond to my email, they're deleted, or please include a resume and a video or audio recording to be considered for this position. And then people will respond to me and they won't have a resume or a video or audio recording. And I just delete those people because they're not even reading the post or
Yeah.
looking at what the requirements are for the job. So, so that helps me weed through on some jobs where I get like 100 applicants. I'll weed through at least half of them with just those basic things, people not following instructions. And then otherwise, you just get people who blanket apply for every single job and don't have the qualifications. And it's pretty obvious fairly early on. So I just delete those people pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I also, at this stage, you can kind of tell who is writing you an AI cover letter in their response. And I really don't like those. If I see, I'd rather have two sentences that are written from the person's own voice than have two paragraphs of super professional,
Yeah.
like very mechanical AI response. So those are a few things. I guess I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to you, Jasper, and you can discuss, whatever I've missed, or your process, how it differs from mine, or things like that.
Yeah, yeah, that was a great start. So thank you for sharing. And it pretty much very similar for me. So I learned from online jobs PH from you. I don't need to go over that too much, but basically all the th same things you shared. One cool thing that they recently added, and I'll just mention this real quick as an aside, but another thing when you're looking for applicants, you don't have to request this right away, but typically once we get serious with someone, we ask them for the DISC report. And I know you use the Colby test. And
Yeah.
so those are two popular ones, the Colby test and the DISC report. And I think there's some other ones like Myers-Briggs is popular and a few other personality tests like that.
This is
Um,
one. Yeah.
yeah. And so, those aren't the end all be all, but I think they definitely help when you're trying to filter people for a job role. And one cool thing the online jobs recently added is that if you go ahead and post a job on there, they're specifically using the DISC test, but you go ahead and post a job and you click their little, it's like a AI DISC thing or something, and they will analyze your job posting and tell you what indicators on the DISC test that you should be looking for in that role. So
I
that's
haven't
very,
seen that yet. That's cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's very beneficial, especially if you're just starting out and you might not know what to look for. You can also just ask ChatGPT like what DISC test or what Colby test results will be good for this position, and they can point you in the right direction there too. Um, but that's just a cool feature that I've noticed that Online Jobs PH recently added, so that makes them even more valuable, I think. But yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, Upwork, I think used to be really good for me. I used to find a lot of people on there. That's how I found a lot of my cold callers. And I just noticed over the years, it seemed to be kind of just inundated with agencies now. And so every time I make a post for a job, it's just like agencies are hitting me up and it's not even an actual person. It's like just a big, huge company trying to sell me one of their agents or something. So
And they also, they pretend they're a real person too, which is
yeah,
annoying. Like you'll get
yeah,
an applicant and it'll be an individual person's name, and then like I've had to ask people, are you with an agency or am I hiring you? You know,
yeah.
and you can filter in Upwork by agencies and individuals, but that's how they get
Mhm.
around it, is they post as an individual, and then
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to be
Yeah.
careful of that, because when you, I found that a couple of times when I've hired an agency, the work is just not, it's inconsistent,
Yeah.
and what's happened is the person's built the reputation as an individual, and then they've just hired a bunch of people under them, and then your quality is not necessarily good. So it's a
Yeah.
good point.
I definitely agree. So, but yeah, I could mention that briefly. I guess when you're hiring people, there's kind of like I would say four main things that you can do when you're hiring someone. Number one, you can hire them yourself, make the job posting, do all that stuff yourself. Number two, you could ask your team for referrals. That's a great source
Mhm.
if you have a team. But obviously, if you
Yeah,
don't have a team yet, you can't do that. But once you start working with people, virtual assistants are obviously friends with other virtual assistants, so they'll be able to refer you to other people. And I found a lot of great people that way, so that's great. But
yeah,
that's only if you have a team. And then number three, you can try working with these agencies, but in most cases, like you said, they're not going to be the best results. Also, you might not have the same person always working on your thing. Like if it's an
yeah,
agency, they might be interchanging different agents. So you don't really know who you're working with, and you're not usually working directly with that person. So you can't build a personal relationship. They're not like part of your company culture. So I don't love that model, but if you're just getting started, you've never hired a virtual assistant, it could be a good stepping stone just to kind of see what it looks like. Um, and then lastly, you could work with like a recruiting agency. So there's a bunch of them. You mentioned somewhere.com. That's probably like the highest tier. If you're hiring virtual assistants, they're very expensive. But there's that one. There's one called Riva Global. There's Rapid Assistance that we've talked about before. And there's just a lot of companies like that. So the difference between those and the agency is you're paying them an upfront fee, and then the person's working directly for you. So they're sourcing someone for you, but then they're going to come and work directly for you. So that's more beneficial than agency, in my opinion.
yeah,
But yeah, so if you have no idea what to do, or maybe you don't have the time to sift through these things yourself, you can go with a recruiting company like one of those that we mentioned. But you will have to pay kind of a large deposit to get that person. So it can be good to find out how to hire people yourself. But pretty much everything you touched on is kind of how we do things, like making sure you put something in your description in your job post to filter people out. So we do the same thing, which is to include like 30 to 60-second video introduction, or your application won't be considered. We put that right at the top and again at the bottom. And so then you can just, if you get 100 applicants and like probably 75 of them won't even do that, then you can just delete all those people. And like you said,
if they're not going to take the time to do that, then why would you want them on your team? Like they're not going to listen to
yeah,
anything, right?
yeah. And I think more than anything, I think is like you said, where we use AI obviously in our business, and I think now employees are using AI and they're just mass applying to job posts and they're not even reading them. And so that's not someone we want to work with. We want someone like you said who's take the time to read it, maybe send us a couple sentences like, "Hey, I saw your job posting. I like maybe this part of your job posting." That person I want to get on an interview with right away. Like if
Yeah,
they actually took the time to read it, maybe they looked up our company and they're like, "Hey, I saw you do this, this, and this. I would love to help you with that." Like that's someone that you definitely want to work with. So definitely a good thing to include a filter. And then when you do get started hiring people, like you said, you can start with part-time or you can just start with a project. I think it's actually probably more beneficial to start that way if you can. Some virtual assistants won't want to work for part-time. They might be looking for a full-time role only. So
yeah,
you can do that, but if possible, I would recommend doing maybe like a week-long project with someone just to see kind of if they're going to be a fit for you. And then that way it's not a huge expense for you and it's not a huge commitment for them. And then you guys can just kind of see how you vibe with each other and see what their work is like, see if they like working with you, and then you guys can continue after that. So I think that's a good way to start working with people. And then do you want to go into like managing real quick, like some of the tools we use for that, or any other hiring pieces you think we should touch on?
Uh, I don't know. I guess just to speak to one of the things you said, we also make it clear to people if we were going to bring them on that we're going to do a 30-day trial. And so that's another way to minimize your risk is just be like, and I frame it as it's a mutual trial. Like we want to make sure you're happy with the company, and we also want to make sure that you're a fit for our company with culture and with the way you work and your productivity. So we're going to do this, and these are the milestones we'd expect, and then at 30 days we'll check in and see if there's a mutual fit. So it's another way to like not feel like, oh my god, I've just committed to this person forever.
Yeah,
Because we've done less than 30 days with people and been like after 2 weeks just like, hey, this is not a fit for us. Thanks for giving us a
yeah.
try or whatever. So I don't know if we want to go deep into what were we saying, managing, and that might be another episode, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we should
But
just week in
that's a
business.
great point what you said there with the with the trial period. And I think one more thing we could touch on and then we can move on is just like the actual hiring process. So once you find someone that you like,
That's a good point. Yeah,
you obviously want to make them an offer and just, make things very clear in your offer. It could just be bullet points or it could be a formal offer, whatever you want to do, but just make things very clear, the offering the whatever wage you're offering them, whatever hours you're expecting them to work, like the actual time, not just the number of hours, but the actual time zone and the time period you're expecting
yeah,
them to work.
Right.
Some of the things that they would be expected to do, like your job roles and stuff, you don't have to go in detail, but just like give them some bullet points in the job offer. We typically just send them an email or something, or a chat with a job offer. And then if they accept, then you just take all those bullet points. You can ask ChatGPT or you can do it yourself just to come up with an actual agreement. And then make sure you guys, both sign that obviously before you get started. And then once you do that, you just want to make sure that you have some sort of onboarding process. It doesn't have to be like a corporate thing, but just make sure that you start them off on the right foot so that they know what to expect working with you. They know how to communicate with your team, like invite them to your Slack if you have Slack. Make sure you set them up with a company email if you have that set up, and just share them with your CRM or with all the tools that they're going to be expected to use. I would recommend sharing all that with them before their actual first day so they can kind of review things on their own. And then you can send them, obviously Loom videos and SOPs and stuff before the first day. And then onboarding week, I think, is very important. So just like introducing them to the team, making sure they understand all the things that they're going to have to do. But at the same time, I like to kind of keep that brief. So obviously, during our first week, I typically meet with people every single day, but I like to keep that no longer than an hour. I try to keep it like 30 minutes if I can, because I really want them to have on the job training. That's the best way they're going to learn, is when they're actually diving in and doing the job that you're hiring them for. So you definitely want to make sure that you're checking in with them daily for the first week, maybe 2 weeks, but make sure that they're also, putting in the work, and you're not just on meeting with them all day long, just hand holding them. You want to make sure they have room to run. So but yeah, I'll turn it over to you on some of your advice there too.
Yeah, no, I think those are great points, and it's all the same stuff. I would say get the onboarding, have the onboarding organized, and have the expectations organized, because that's the biggest thing that team members need is clear expectations of how they can succeed, and how they can measure their, whether they're hitting their targets, milestones, expectations. Um, Yeah, and for the job offer, the same thing we do. One of the things I would say about the job offer is, with the 30-day trial, sometimes we do a graduated thing where it would be like, this is your trial rate of pay and your trial bonus structure. And this would be, if we decide to make you a permanent team member, it would graduate to this. So, and we even have that tiers even after the 30 days. You might be like, after 6 months, you can graduate to this, that kind of thing. So you
Okay.
can build that into what else? I don't know. I don't think there's anything, just like the onboarding stuff. One of the other things, and this is included under tools and platforms and all that stuff, but make sure they know uh, how they will get paid and how they will track their hours. And so on our team, we use a platform called Clockify, and you just clock in and clock out with that. And at the end of the week, your hours will be tracked. You can manually adjust it. We have that on our team. If you don't want team members to be able to manually adjust their hours, you can have one of your team that oversees that, and you'd have to get an okay from that person to adjust hours. But and just let them know how they're going to get paid, because similar to sellers who are worried about scams, this is, they might, Filipinos have been taken advantage of, or not Filipinos, but VAs. I have all Filipinos on my team, but
Yeah.
VAs have been taken advantage of by prospective employers, or people that like have them work for a week and then don't pay them, or
Yeah.
don't pay them all their wages because they had trouble with their business and they were behind on the wages, and just never paid the people because they couldn't. So you want to make sure that you assure them, like, we pay whenever you're going to pay, every Friday or whatever it is, and we pay via whatever platform you're going to pay. We use Wise. Some people can use PayPal, or there's other. What's the other one? There's one that begins with an X that PayPal
Zoom.
has.
Yeah, Zoom.
Zoom, yeah. So there are a variety of platforms you can pay people internationally, but make sure you have that queued up so that they know how they're going to get paid and when they're going to get paid, and that requires you to get their information from them, their bank information and their address and everything that you'll need to set up payments to them in whatever your platform is. So that's the other thing I would add. And I think that's all I've got.
Yeah, that's a great point. So thanks for adding that. And yeah, we use Wise as well. There's a Zoom one, which is XOOM. That's by PayPal. I used to use that. And then there's one called Deal, which is two E's, DEEL. I haven't used it yet, but it sounds like it's a good one also. So you can use any of those three. I like Wise. We both use that. It's very easy to use. But
Yeah, I selected Wise because from the research I did, it was the one that gave the most favorable exchange rate to the recipient. And I wanted, people to get the maximal amount of money from the exchange. And that's,
mhm,
that's why I chose that one.
yeah. Yeah, and like you said, that's also another thing you want to get from them, before they start is their banking information, everything like that. And then same thing, because you mentioned scams, it's never happened to me, but maybe sometimes a virtual assistant could be possibly scamming you or something. So we always just send them like a test payment anywhere from $1 to $5, something super small, as soon as they give us their bank information, just to make sure that, it's going to the right place before you send them a few $100, just to make sure, you're sending that to the right place. But yeah, I think that's a good wrap on this. So hopefully that was helpful for people who have never hired before. And feel free to drop some comments, questions, or you guys can message us on social media. We'd be happy to go deeper into this. And maybe in the future, we can do an episode kind of on training, managing, and having that ongoing relationship with your VAs once you do hire them. So if that's
Yeah.
interesting to you, just drop us a comment and we'll be happy to dive into that in a future episode. But for now, we're going to move on. So we're going to do our business check-in for the week. Typically, we like to do victories, challenges, and we're both going to break down a deal that we closed this past week. So you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, sure. As far as the week in business, we got two contracts this week and we sold two this week. So
That's awesome.
yeah, that's a good week in that way. We closed one, and that was a vacant land deal, and I'll break that down in a minute. As far
Sweet.
as challenges go, I don't want to go too deep into this because it's a wholesaling podcast, but I've had some challenges with a lender with one of my subject to deals, just being a terrible lender and not getting things right. So that's been just a frustration for me. I won't go into detail about that. Maybe sometime I'll do something on my separately about sub twos and ins and outs and pros and cons and challenges and victories and all that stuff. But this is a wholesaling podcast, but I had to share it because it's one of my challenges this week.
Yeah.
Just not getting our payments straight and telling us we're not paid, and I have to call people and get on the phone with the automated banking until I can get to a representative, and then they don't have my authorization to release on file. Blah blah blah. It just goes on and on. Everybody's had that experience. Sellers not picking up the phone. This was a big one this week. We had two sellers that signed a contract that we sent them and did not talk to us. And so we're not going to sign our end of these contracts until the seller actually gets on the phone with us. That's where we
Yeah.
are right now. And so it's just hilarious that we send somebody an offer on e-sign and they sign it, and then we try and call them to follow up. Hey, thanks for signing the contract. Just want to get some of the closing details straight with you or whatever, what to expect.
Mhm.
They will not answer, and we're texting them, we're calling them, and it's like, what's going on here? I don't know what they're doing, but
Yeah.
we're not going to consider that a contract until we actually talk to the person and have an actual I'm not ready to do a full SMS only. And maybe I
Right.
would if they were responding to SMS rapidly. Like if
Yeah.
they're not responding to SMS. So it's like they sign a contract and then ghosted, which is very strange. But we had two of those in the last week, which is crazy. So we've been following up with them, trying to call them, trying to text them, trying to call them from every phone number, like all three people in acquisitions, trying different phone numbers and stuff, and just no response. So just bizarre. I don't know what's going on because technically they've signed a legally binding contract and it says that in our contract and we have an e-signature to prove it. So like we could go sue these people or whatever, but it's just weird, very weird.
Yeah, we've had a few of those too, and I don't know if they're trying to scam or not, but we've had some in the past where we did sign the contract and then we couldn't get a hold of them at all. So obviously we just canceled it. So now we do the same thing you do, where if we can't speak to them, we're not signing our side of the contract.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
we're also trying to improve our contract to close rate, and so we
yeah,
don't need like, oh, this is a contract. It's not a contract until
no,
somebody talks to
yeah,
you. So yeah. So anyway, that was one, and then another, just a weird seller situation. I won't go too deep into, but we had a contract with a seller. I think in PropStream, which is one of the things our acquisitions people use. The person who signed was the only person in PropStream, but then she had an ex-husband who still had, blah blah blah, and so now we got to try and get a hold of this guy because he has the right to the property because they didn't clean it up in the divorce, and I think maybe she told us one thing like she had the right to sell the property. A lot of sellers will tell you things that they don't necessarily know for sure, but they just sounds good to them or it's what they want to believe. So like, yeah, I can sell the property. Yeah, I've got the right to sell it. It's my property, but they don't. So it's good to dig deeper into those types of statements by sellers when you're on the phone with them. But anyway, this woman told us she had the right to sell the property. It was hers, and we were fooled by the fact that she was the only one listed. But her ex-husband has uh, rights to the property, and he doesn't want to talk to us or to his ex-wife. So that was my other challenge this week, just trying to skip trace him, track him down, left him a couple, 2, 3 voicemails, not too many to overwhelm him, but probably 2 voicemails and a few texts or whatever. So that's just frustrating because this is another deal where we had this woman under contract on a piece of land where we were set to make 20K on a vacant lot. So we're pretty stoked, and then now even if we can get a hold of this guy, we're going to have to pay him some money. So the profit's going to shrink, but uh, still, it'd be great to get a hold of him and see what he wants out of it and see if we could get him to the table. And that's been the frustration. So those are my
Mm.
challenges for the week. Um, Victories would be, 2 contracts, 2 sold. We got our our lead managers sort of stepping into a bigger role because we have a new closer now who can follow up on contracts and follow up on offers and get contracts. So that's kind of a win. We had a meeting on Friday, and she's going to expand her role and sort of shift her role and take on some stuff as far as managing some of the marketing and different aspects of acquisitions. That'll be nice to have her grow into managing more of the KPI tracking and reporting, and also taking a lead on transaction coordination, which is a big one for us because we've had trouble getting a really clear transaction coordination process in place, and we've had too many cooks in the kitchen, as it were. Sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 different people emailing the closing attorney, and so she's going to take point, and she's really good at that stuff, and that's great. So I'm really happy with that. Because I've been trying to hand off transaction coordination for about 2 years now, and I keep thinking I got it handed off, and then it'll fall back in my lap sometimes. So I think this is a good solution. I'm excited about that. And then the other victory is our new acquisitions guy. We talked about hiring at the top of this thing, and so we found this guy. This is a good one to talk about. We found this guy on Online Jobs PH, and he was just on there looking for a job, and he found our post, and we connected, and it seemed like a really good fit. And we did a couple interviews and some role playing as far as the when you're talking about hiring too, like now if we're doing a sales role, we do role playing in the interviews. We really want to see what somebody's skills are and if they can on the fly pretend they're on a phone call and deal with a pretend seller. So we did that, and we found a really good culture fit with this guy. His personality, his energy, his positivity, attitude, all these things fit with us. His skill set was really strong. We felt when we hired him, we weren't 100% certain until he jumped in, but he proved himself within the first week. I think he got a contract his first week, and I was not expecting that. I didn't put any pressure on him for that, but he did. We're at now 9 contracts for the month, and I think he's gotten most of those. So we're only
Nice.
through the month. Yeah. So really, really a blessing, and I'm very grateful, and that's a win for the business. And yeah, so as far as the just touching back on the topic at the top, the hiring process was we met him on Online Jobs PH. We went to live interviews. We did a couple of interviews with the acquisitions team, with me, and then with the operations manager, and then we brought him on board. We did the whole process we discussed, the offer and the whole thing, and 30-day trial. So we're coming up at the end of the 30-day trial, and we're going to do a check-in on Monday. But his
Nice.
background was also just the other piece of the hiring thing that we talked about is he worked for a service, for an agency, and the agency was sort of changing direction. And after his position with them ended, they weren't able to place him in a similar position. They were offering him different types of work that he didn't really want to do. He wanted to stay with real estate and acquisitions, and so that was their loss was our gain. You know, not only did we not have to pay them a finder's fee, but we were able to hire him directly, which is great.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually, it turns out that this guy is in the same work for the same company that Jasper's main acquisitions guy works for. So definitely a win. And then I think that's victories and challenges. Do you want me to jump into a deal story, or do you want to do yours and then should I just roll through and do the deal
Yeah,
breakdown?
let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just break down the one we closed this week. So we closed a vacant lot this week, and it was $8,000 profit on that. So that's our minimum vacant lot profit that we want to hit.
That's
So
great.
that's good. Yeah, I think our average deal right now is like over 10 for the year, but our minimum is 8 that we want to hit. So It was a vacant lot, and the campaign that it came from was what we call in our business a guerrilla campaign. And Jasper, you've talked to this in other episodes about how you'll go where you've closed a deal and you go into PropWire and do a circle around that area. It's a similar thing for us. We'll just pull the data in an area where we know we have a buyer who's really looking, or where we closed a deal. So we know we have a buyer who will buy anything in this one small area. And so my acquisitions manager pulled a list there, and we cold called it, and we got some leads there, and that's where this came from. So that campaign was started in October, and that's when we first got this lead into our system, and then we closed it this past week on April 15th. So November, December, January, February, March, April. That's 6 months from the time the lead came in until we closed it. And we had a big period of ghosting in between there. We had initial offer of uh, I think it was 17K was the initial offer, and he was like good with that. And then he ghosted, and then he changed his mind and didn't want to talk to us or anything. And so then we went from October until a month ago, until March, without hearing from him, but we were following up, following up, following up, right? So I think there were, like, when I was looking through the comments, there were 8 to 10 follow-ups in that range from in that 6 month period. Like, there are a few early on, and then when it becomes apparent he's ghosting, then it's like one every 30 days. And then he came back on board and was like, "What's your offer?" And and then my acquisitions manager found that he was asking more now. He wanted more than what we'd offered him previously. So we already had, we do a thing called stealth marketing in our business, where if we have somebody who seems like a hot lead in a good area and we know we have buyers there, sometimes we reach out to the buyers for a price check and just be like, "Hey, would you be interested in this lot at," and we ask them, "What price would you be interested at?" Or we give them a price and say, "Would you pay this?" So it's kind of like a price check that we do, and we call it stealth marketing. And so we already knew we had a buyer who would pay 25 for this, and this guy wanted 22 now instead of 17. So I went to the buyer and I was like, "Hey man, this seller came back. I know you were interested in this before, but he wants more money. What could you do for this lot?" And he came up to 30. And so then I knew if I gave the seller everything he wanted, we could still make our minimum. And so then I went back to the seller. So this is kind of what I call deal making, like working both ends and trying to get the profit. So then I went back to the seller and I went in, and he was really challenging. He was doing the whole, "I've got other offers and blah, blah, blah. And somebody's already offered me this. And, what's your best offer?" That he was a tough negotiator. So we went back and forth, back and forth, but I really wanted to lock him down because I knew we had a built-in buyer at that price, and I knew he would do 22. So I was trying to, I was starting off at whatever, 19, 20, 21. He just was not budging. And so finally, I did the hard, "Oh man, I can't believe this, but I guess we can do 22. And then so I locked him in at 22, and then we had the 8,000 margin. But I guess the other thing about this is that the seller is very old school, so he would not do email, doesn't believe in it, or is suspicious of it, stuff like that. So this is the one I mentioned on a previous episode where I did a handwritten cover letter, included my business card, a paper copy of my business card with a printed copy of the contract, and send it to him FedEx overnight because I wanted to strike while the iron was hot. Well, because this guy had been ghosting and he'd been in and out and saying he had other offers. So sent it FedEx overnight. He got it. He was also old school in the way that he wanted his lawyer to look at it. So he was not in a hurry either. He was like, "Well, we'll get it over to him sometime this week." Like, he's physically taking this to his lawyer to have him look at it. And but he did follow through, and his lawyer looked at it. He was good. So then I was surprised because then, like, I'd followed up with him a couple of times, and then one day I just got an email from my lawyer. "Hey, we just got this contract from another lawyer. Are what's the deal with this?" And I was like, "Oh, awesome." And so then we got the buyer signed up and put everything in escrow, and we closed in a couple of weeks after that. So I guess we got the new contract that I got was the 26th of March, and then we closed the 15th. There was there were two delays. One delay was the closing attorney, our closing attorney, needed a death certificate for the mother that passed the property on, and we had a little bit of trouble with that because it was filed in DC or something. But fortunately, the seller found a copy of it in their records, so we were able to get that without like having to have them go to Washington DC, or reach out to DC and have them send it by mail and take weeks and stuff. And then the other one was that the buyer was supposed to close on a Friday and forgot to wire his funds or whatever, but he didn't wire until the Monday or maybe even the Tuesday, so he was a little bit of a delay. But we those were the two delays, and then it did close. And actually, another positive note about this one is that the seller, um, asked us if we were buying in another county where he had another property, and he asked us if we'd be interested in that one. So that
Awesome.
turned out positive. So I think that, I guess one of the takeaways from that is just when somebody is old school to stay, stay in their lane. Like if they don't want to do all this stuff, don't try and force them to do this stuff, and really respect that they don't want to do email and they want to talk on the phone and they want to show it to their lawyer, and their timetable is different than yours might want to be. But just to stay with them in that and honor that, right? I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things that made him feel like, oh, I like dealing with this company. I'd sell him another property. And so
Yeah.
he he gave us another one to look at. So that's cool. And then, the other thing is persistence, right? We always talk about this with all these deal stories. The lead came in October. We made an offer and had a verbal acceptance. We had a buyer on the hook in October, and then we were ghosted for 6 months. But then the follow-ups, just the process of following up. One day it was the right time for him to receive a text from us, and he was like, "What's your offer?" And then we had a new conversation, and then we were able to get his new price and figure out a deal. So follow up, and persistence. And that is my deal story.
That's awesome. That's a great breakdown. And hopefully another deal out of it too. So that's even
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, it's a county we've never worked in, so we're going to look at it.
Yeah. Well, that's always exciting when a seller has another property that you
Yeah.
didn't know about before.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and a great strategy there too with the self-marketing for, I think we mentioned in past episodes, but for anyone who hasn't ever heard of that before, that's a great strategy, especially when you're just getting started out. You might not be sure on your numbers. Definitely a great strategy to use. Just reach out to any buyers that you know and trust in the area and ask them what they might be willing to pay for this property, before you get under contract, and then you have a guaranteed exit right there. So
I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen with newer wholesalers who send me deals for potential JV is, I would say, like 75 to 90% of the deals I get sent for JV are overpriced.
yeah,
I'm just like, thanks for sending these, but we just can't work with this price in this area,
yeah,
and then, so yeah, it's really important to get the right price.
yeah.
So why don't we switch over to you, Jasper, and you can do your week in business, and if you got a deal to break down.
Yeah, definitely. Just want to touch on what you just said though, because that's a great point. I think we both get a lot of deals sent to us from wholesalers, and I always do the same thing. I'll usually give them like my offer, what it would be, or what I think it could sell for, even if it's a ways off. And a lot of times, like you said, it's like sometimes I'm 50 to 100,000 below their asking because it's that much overpriced. And I mean, it's not a knock against them because we all have to learn how to run our numbers. It's part of the business, and you might not
Yeah,
know it starting out. But even just if you're listening to this podcast, you're working in North Carolina, feel free to reach out to either one of us and ask for our opinion before you put under contract. That way,
yeah,
you can have our feedback there. So, but if not us, you can always reach out to buyers on investor base or just buyers that you know already and see if they can give you an
Facebook
offer
groups.
on it.
Yeah,
So, yeah. But yeah, great breakdown and sounds like a good week. So thank you for sharing everything.
yeah, my
I'm
pleasure.
excited that your guy is crushing it still. It's awesome.
Yeah,
That's going to
it's
be a
cool
game
that
changer.
he knows your guy too. It's fun.
Yeah. And we should see if there must be a way to figure out all the other people because I assume there's a good bunch of people that got let go from that type of position,
Yeah,
so
well,
we gotta see if we
probably
can figure that out.
probably the both these guys we're talking about know people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we might have to ask them about it because that
we
could
could
be a
start
good
our
way
own
to,
agency and get them
yeah.
in our stable and then farm them out to people. Yeah,
I know. But yeah, that's a great point you mentioned. That just made me think of that when you mentioned that he was changing directions and trying to bring everyone along with him. But some of those people aren't going to want to do that. They might want to just stick with real estate because that's what they already know. So
yeah.
no,
And there's income potential there. I mean, I guess there's income potential in the other enterprise that agency is doing, but it to the guy who works for us, it's felt a little dicey for him. It felt like he wasn't, you know, it
yeah,
wasn't as solid as real estate for him either.
yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll jump into mine. So I'll just go over KPIs and then I'll do victories and challenges and break down a deal. So this week was good. We started this month a bit slow and picked it up this week. So we got 6 signed contracts, which was huge
Wow.
this week. So yeah, kudos to the team for that. That was awesome. And then we got sold only one this week, but we have with those 6 contracts, we were working on getting pictures all week. So now I have, I think, 5 ready to sell next week. So I'm excited to be able to work on that. It's always fun to have a bunch of deals to sell. And it's not fun when you don't have any deals to sell. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm excited for that. And then we closed 3 this week. So one of those was one I mentioned on a prior episode where we had a buyer back out on the day before closing. So we just bought that one, and then we're hoping to resell it next week, this coming week. So that was one of our closings, and the other 2 were just wholesale deals. And I was able to what did you say?
Oh, I just said nice. That you got three closings and 6 contracts. That's a great week.
Yeah,
One
yeah, it was a
sold.
good week.
One sold. You can't sneeze at that either.
Yeah. So yeah, so a few victories in there too. And I also had a double closing this week. So that was exciting for me too, because that was my second time doing that. And I have another one lined up for the end of this month. So I'm excited for that. I'm just trying to learning as I go, but it's kind of fun. And basically, like for anyone who's not familiar, basically I'm providing the funding for someone to do a double close, which is when you buy and resell on the same day. And for me, it's a great business because I just get my money back the following day with the payoff and everything. And then the wholesaler gets to buy and sell. And it can be a good way if you have like maybe a realtor involved. A lot of realtors don't like assignments, so you can do a double closing that way. Or on the other side of things, maybe if you have a really sizable assignment fee, you might not want the seller or buyer or both to see that fee. And if you just buy and sell, then it's just a buy and sell, and they won't see it. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so I've been enjoying doing those. Like I said, I've only done 2 so far, but looking to do some more. So if anyone's interested, feel free to reach out to me. But as far as other victories, we finally sold a PPC lead, and we're hoping to close it in May. So I am so excited about that. It's been a long, long time coming. Still most likely going to shut that down, but I'm excited to at least hopefully recoup some money next month when we close that one. So that would be nice. Um, but even still, I mean, I'll touch on that in challenges, but it's just funny. But that was a victory. We were able to finally get some revenue on the board from PPC, so that's great. And then, like I said, the closings and contracts were victory. And with this one closing in particular that I'll break down was amazing. And then besides that, the team has been kind of firing on all cylinders this month. Like I said, we had a slow start to the month, but it's picked up last week and this week. And I just feel like we're getting a lot of contracts. We're closing a lot of deals lately, and it just feels really good. Like it just feels like we have a great company culture right now, and I'm just happy with the 2 new people that I hired this year. They're both great culture fits, super hard workers, and have really taken a lot off my plate. So that's been just fantastic. So obviously, circling back to our conversation at the top, but you made a great point that a lot of people have that limiting belief about hiring someone, and I had the same thing when I was first getting started. I kind of dipped my toes in, like I hired a cold caller at first, and I was like even scared to do that. I hired them part time, like you said, and then like I finally graduated to full time and all that stuff. But once I finally hired, like Hermosi talks about it, but once I finally hired my first person, like my acquisitions, which I shared in a previous podcast, but that really was just a total game changer for me. And I think you'll find the same thing if you've never hired someone like in a skill position before. It's just a total game changer for your business once you do that, because a major part of your business is getting contracts and revenue, and all of a sudden someone else is bringing you revenue. So that's just amazing to think about. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I would definitely encourage anyone who's on the fence to try hiring out your first person and see how it goes, because it can really change your business and your life for the better. So
And you
uh,
have like 10 or 11 people on your team now?
no, no, I think we only have 7. Let's see, 6.
Oh, wow. So you've downsized a lot.
Yeah, so because I don't have cold callers anymore, so that's where my team needs to be bigger. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I have 6 full time that, well, technically 7. So I have 6 full time that work like on revenue producing stuff, and then I have 1 full time admin, so 7, and then 8 including me. So that's my team right now. But yeah, so they've been a great help for me, and yeah, I've just been really enjoying that, especially transactions piece, like you shared in your check-in. Like I've been trying to hand that off for more than 2 years, for a long, long time, and I think it's my 4th or 5th time trying to hire a transactions person, and I think I finally got it right. So I'm really happy about that. But yeah, that's been awesome. So for challenges, it was interesting with the PPC lead this week. It's still continues to be like what I shared in previous episodes, where these leads are like the most difficult, and it's just very frustrating. to kind of work with these people. And so that's why I'm really glad that we're going to make some money back, but I'm still leaning towards just canceling this thing, even though we're starting to get some more. Like we got another contract this week from PPC, just a seller contract, a signed contract.
Mhm.
So it does seem like we're getting some traction, but these people just seem more difficult to work with for whatever reason. I don't know if it's my limiting belief or just what happens to be. I don't know. But this seller this week was reaching out to me. Like Duncan gave her my phone number, which is unfortunate, and she's just been blowing me up nonstop ever since then. Like every single day, just texting, calling every single day. And so then the other day, we've been under contract for weeks, and she hasn't let us get into the property to see to take pictures and stuff. And she finally let us do that. And then she called me like right after, did you get the pictures? Did you get the pictures? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I've got other things I'm also working on. I'll review them later today. And so she was just like freaking out about that. And then I told her, I was like, review the pictures, everything looks good. And we look forward to closing with you in a few weeks. And then she called me again, and then she was just like asking me about the next steps in the process and all this stuff, which Giselle already went over with her. I know she did. But anyways, I went through that all again, and then she was like, "Oh, well, you definitely cannot see the property before closing. Like, you got the pictures. That's all that we're going to do." And I was like, "Okay, well, it's standard process. It's in our contract, which you reviewed and signed. We like to do a final walkthrough before closing, just to make sure everything looks the same as it does today." And she was just not having it, just totally freaking out.
Mm.
She was like saying that we're going to back out on her and all this stuff. And I was like, well, no, if we're going to back out, I would have just done it today because I could see the pictures. I know what I'm getting. Like it's no problem. I already gave my word. And she's just freaking out. And so and then she just flips it around and she's like, oh, well, if you want to see the property again, well then I'll just back out. I'll just sell to someone else. And I was like, so you're the one trying to back out. It's not me. It's like what's going on here? But then once again, I was just frustrated when she said that. Like I was kind of laughing, but I was also frustrated because I'm like another PPC seller, which is just their first instinct. Oh, I'll just back out. I'll just sell to someone else. I'm like, oh, cool. So like this just means nothing to you. So like we've already cleared her title. Like at her request, we started the title search before the photos. We usually don't do that just in case it doesn't work for us. But we already started the title search. We got these affidavits signed, all this stuff, and I'm like, dude, we've spent hundreds, possibly up to $1,000 already trying to help you sell this property, and now you're just telling me you're going to back out. Like, how is that fair? So, anyways, I won't go into depth, but that was frustrating, and I don't know if we'll get it closed. I'm hopeful. She's a nice lady, but she's very high maintenance. So I'm hopeful we'll be able to get that done and get it closed. But we also had another difficulty this week with another PPC lead because I shared this on a previous episode, but we got this PPC contract. She backed out like 2 hours later. And apparently there was a realtor driving by their house or whatever. I shared that on another episode. But
Yeah, that's a crazy story.
but so yeah, so we filed a memorandum and then we get called this week from one of her relatives apparently, because that was her story that she was giving it to the family. And so we get a call from this week from a relative, super frustrated, and didn't sound like, that's what they were trying to do. Anyways, she said she was a relative. I don't know if she was, but then next thing I know, I checked the register of deeds office, and she did sign a quitclaim deed over to someone in her family. And so just tried to basically circumvent our contracts. And I was like, wow. So that was frustrating. I reached out to my attorney, and he was like, you could sue them because this is like fraud. They literally circumvented on purpose around your contract, and they knew you had a valid contract, and they just quitclaimed it to this other person so that they could get around you.
So why did
Um,
the person call you mad? Did the memorandum come into play?
No, because they just did this themselves. Like, you know how we can file documents? Like, they didn't do an attorney title search or anything. They literally just did a quick claim deed that looks like you got it off of Google, and they just filed it.
Yeah.
So they didn't do a title search. So that's why, so they just filed a quick claim deed on their own accord. And yeah, that's what they decided to do. So,
But why did they call you? I don't understand.
well, because they didn't see the memorandum because they never did a title search.
Oh, okay. But
Yeah.
so when did the memorandum come up?
Well, it didn't. It didn't. She just called me because I sent them our demand letter, that you and I use sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
I sent them that letter, and then that's when they called me right back, and they were like, "This contract is void. Like we already transferred it to our family member." And then when they said that, I was like, "Oh, you already transferred it to your family member? Like, how did you do that?" And then I looked it up, and that's how I found all this stuff out. So that was frustrating. And if it was a different scenario, I might have pursued like litigation on this one. But he told me it's probably going to take months, probably going to cost 10,000 or more, and I
Yeah.
just didn't really. I'm just gonna let it go. So it's just frustrating, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles for that one, I guess. So, but that's that.
Hopefully
Um,
that's not all PPC leads. That's weird that you're having that problem with PPC leads.
Yeah, there's that one, and then there's another one that we contracted way back in January. And just like you said, he's been ghosting us ever since. This is someone we spoke to multiple times before the contract, but then ever since he's just ghosting. So every PPC lead so far, this is very difficult. But like I said, we got one more contract this week from that, and they actually don't seem to be that way. So I'm hoping we can get that one closed smoothly along with the other one. Um, but yeah, all in all, it was a good week. We just had a couple of those challenges, so that was disappointing. But on our deal breakdown this week, I'll dive into that and try to keep this brief. But I'm breaking down this one because it was very difficult, and I think maybe it could help some people. So I'll just start from the beginning. So this lead came in a long time ago, way back in 2023. So
Yeah.
almost 2 years of following up with this person. But June of 2023 is when this lead came in. Just in my Podio, it shows 52 follow-up attempts before contract. I think that's a little bit low. I think we probably did more than that, but this is just like the automated tracker that tracks. And so anyways, that shows 52. And like I said, came in June, and we didn't contract this until January of this year. So I don't know how many months it is. I think it's about 15, 16 months, but long, long time. Sorry, it's like a year and a half. So it's like 18 months. But either way, long, long time of follow up. And we were going back and forth with this guy. It wasn't someone who was ghosting us. Like he was always responsive, but we were always like just kind of a bit too far apart where I think he was in like 180 to 190 range, and we were always around like 150 range. So we were just following up, following up, following up. And sometimes, their property can go up in value or they can come down in price, and we kind of try to meet in the middle there. But we were just following up. And over time, his price did start to come down. Our price wasn't really going up because his property didn't like appreciate too much, just a little bit. And so we ended up coming up, and we ended up signing for 163,500 after, like I said, after about a year and a half of follow up. And so he came down from that 180, 190. We came up a bit. And it was funny though, because there were two co-owners on this property. And so we were speaking to one mainly, and his name was Walter. And so we had signed with Walter for 162, right? And we had it sent to him and then sent to his co-owner. Her name is Deborah, right after him. And so he already signed at 162. Next thing we know, we're following up with Deborah, and she's ghosting us all of a sudden after Walter's already signed. So we're halfway there with this contract. And so now she's ghosting us. And then she's like, oh, well, I got another offer for 165. And I was like, oh, well, your co-owner has already signed her contract. Like, what's going on? And so, long story short, that the writing was on the wall there. We should have listened to that sign, but she ended up signing because we met her in the middle. So we came up to 163.5 and she signed. And Walter had already signed. And so anyways, we got it signed. And this was in January. And so in this
But
case,
didn't he
we
have to
actually already had the
re-sign it?
property.
Didn't
What's
he have to
that?
re-sign? Did Walter have to re-sign the 163.5?
Yeah, yeah. So we just kind of struck through the net, and then we all initialed it and signed it again. But yeah, so we got it up to 163.5, which is not the end of the world, $1,500, not too bad. But we actually already had this one pre-sold, so we really wanted her to sign because we already had a buyer lined up, like you said. And so yeah, so as soon as we got it signed, we basically signed it to this buyer, and we already had a buyer ready to go at 183.5. So it was already a $20,000 spread for us, which was awesome. So we were super excited. And Walter was living out of state, and Deborah was living in the property. And so, before the time of signing, we already discussed that. And, they were like, yeah, she'll probably need like 30 days or so to move out. And we're like, okay, cool. So we scheduled closing for like early February, and we were, moving along. And then our title search showed that another wholesaler was under contract with this one back in, I think, like October of last year. And they found a memorandum, of course. And so it's always interesting because we've talked about it before, but our memorandums seem to be ignored most of the time.
Yeah,
But I always end up running into other wholesalers memorandums that aren't ignored. So it's very interesting.
yeah.
Maybe I should copy their format or something and use their memorandum for myself. But either way,
Definitely.
so what's
Ours,
that?
ours never work. I mean, like
Yeah,
we've probably filed 30 or 40 of them, and we've gotten two to work or something.
yeah, yeah. It's about the same for me, probably like about 10%. So, so yeah, so anyways, the closing attorney's like, hey, we found this memorandum. And I was like, so like, are you gonna help us with it? And they were like, no, like we have to get this released before we can close. And I was like, awesome. So we reached out to these guys, and they were kind of being kind of dodgy about it. And so I kind of got a weird feeling from these other wholesalers right off the bat. And so we reached out to them and asked for the copy of their contract because, in most memorandums it says like you can ask for a copy of contract by
Yeah,
contacting us at this place. And I think by law you're supposed to provide that because you're filing a memorandum. So you should show that you have a contract signed. Um, for whatever reason, they weren't like disclosing that right away. And they were kind of like, can we see your contract? And I was like, well, no, like you're the one who found a memorandum. Anyway, so they were
Yeah.
kind of being weird about it. And so we were just following up with them. But at the same time, we reached back out to the sellers and just made sure like this was legitimate. And they actually did sign with this company because they were kind of giving us the runaround, the other wholesaler. And so we reached out to both sellers, and Walter was ghosting us at this point, but Deborah was like, no, I never signed with them. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I was like, well, maybe they have a signature from this one guy, but if they don't have two, then that's a fraudulent memorandum anyways, because they don't have a valid contract.
Yeah.
Um, and so anyways, we went down that road, and she said she never signed with them. And she said they actually came to her house late at night or something, and she wouldn't let them in because she didn't sign with them, all this stuff. So there was some drama there. And so
Uh,
then what's that?
I just said, wow, that's coming to her house late at night. That's strange.
Yeah. Yeah, so there was definitely some drama there. It sounds like the other seller had signed with these people, but she never did. And then when they ended up sending us the contract, that was the case. And so he basically had signed for both of them, and she never signed. So he signed for Walter, and then he signed for Deborah, like from his own email for both of them. So that was kind of
That's
interesting.
fraud, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. And so then when I confronted them on that, they totally did a 180, because at first they were like on us and they're like, well, we're not sending you the contract. Like, how do we know you have a valid contract? And then when they said to me, I was like, oh, that's interesting. It looks like this guy signed for both of them, so that's not a valid contract. And they were like, well, if the seller decides to sign like illegitimately, that's not on us, that's on them. And I was like, well, that's true, but you also filed a memorandum, and that's on you. So, anyways, we went back and forth a bit,
So
but
was the lawyer willing to throw the memorandum out based on that? Based on the,
no. So that was the most frustrating part of all of this, because I showed them all the stuff that I was communicating, it was all via email, so I had a record. And I was like, look, like they're admitting that this dude signed for both of them. They don't have two signatures. We do. Anyways, they were like, no. The closing attorney was like, no. So like, well, that's awesome, because all of my memorandums get ignored. But anyways, I'm just complaining at this point. So to get back on track, we couldn't obviously just ignore it. So we ended up agreeing to pay them $7,500, because like I said, we had a good spread on our end, but I didn't feel like 50-50 was fair. I didn't feel like 7,500 was fair, but I
no,
just
it
wanted to
sounds
give
like
them,
500. I was going to say $500.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but apparently they wouldn't close around it. So I was like, okay. And so I just kind of went at it from the approach of trying to make a friend with them rather than just trying to be combative with them. I was like, hey, look, you don't have a valid contract. Like, we can both agree on that, but we'd rather do business with you guys in the future. If you're doing deals in North Carolina, we kind of just gave them that spiel. And I was like, we're kind of doing all the work here in a nice way, but we'd like to get you guys paid, because I know you put in some work too. So, here's my offer. And they accepted right away, of course. So
You
I
should
should
have
have bumped
asked
the
them
best.
for what they wanted. You didn't ask them for what they wanted?
Well, no, they wanted half, and so
Oh, okay.
yeah, and so I gave them a little bit less than half, essentially. And so anyway, so then we agreed with that, and then we thought we were good to close from there. And this was all in like January, February timeframe. And then the seller didn't move out, and here we are 3 months later. And so it took us a super long time to get her to move out. There's a bunch of drama there, but we we basically, the other seller was asking us to kick her out, and we're like, well, she's a co-owner of the property, she's not a tenant, so we can't just kick her out. And he was, I don't know, I think they were brother and sister, or maybe estranged spouses, but I don't know what their relationship was, but they didn't like each other at all, the co-owners. And so he just kept calling us like, can you kick her out, can you kick her out? And we're just like, not really. And so anyways, we kind of like bluffed it with her, where we ended up sending out one of our guys, and he brought her basically a good cop bad cop agreement, where the good cop was, if you move out by Tuesday, I'll give you $1,000 extra at closing. If you don't, then we're gonna enforce the sale. Basically, we're gonna file a specific performance and force the sale. And so obviously she chose $1,000 option, and then she didn't move out on time, so we didn't give her $1,000. But this dragged out for like another week or two, and then finally this week she moved out partially on Tuesday. And then she still like wanted to get her stuff out of the garage. And so we set the appointment for Wednesday. And then she blew off my guy, never showed up. And we were trying to close this on Thursday because there's Good Friday, right? And so then he blew off on Wednesday, and then on Thursday he was going to come out again for like the 10th time he's been to this property. And she was supposed to get the things out of the garage. The reason that we did that is because we already had the keys from Tuesday. Thankfully, we finally got the keys, but I didn't trust her to give her the lockbox code. Obviously, she just moved back in the house. And
Yeah.
so we were like, can you please, go unlock the house, open the garage, and then lock the house back up, and she can get her stuff out, while you're there kind of supervising. And so anyways, he did that on Thursday, but then we ran into the last wrinkle because she signed the closing docs on Tuesday with him, but we didn't have the HUD yet. And so now she needs to just
Oh no.
e-sign. Now she just needs to e-sign the HUD. We can close and record funds. The buyer had sent in their money Thursday morning. They were ready to roll. The other seller, of course, was already signed and he's ready to roll. But she's
Yeah.
like, well, I'm not signing this until I get my stuff out of the garage. And I'm like, well, that's not the way this is going to work. Like, we need to sign it now. And anyways, like, so we went, I was on the phone with her for like an hour on Thursday and multiple calls, just trying to get her to sign. And she's a nice lady, but she just for whatever reason would not move out. Um, and so anyways, I told her, I was like, look, you're about to make $23,000 if you sign this today. But if you don't, tomorrow's a holiday, and we got the weekend, and then we got Monday, our attorney's office is closed again for the holiday. So they're like, both sides. And I was like, the soonest you're getting paid now is Tuesday. And we're not going to let you get your stuff until we have this signed. So it's like, you sign it right now, you'll get paid today, and we'll let you get your stuff. Or wait till Tuesday. You're going to probably make a little bit less money, and you're not going to get your stuff out till then. So, anyways, she finally signed, and we get all the docs in, and this was an all-day affair. And so we got all the docs at like 3 o'clock or something, and so it was pretty tight. And then the other wholesalers were supposed to file this release per the terms of our contract. Me and the other wholesaler signed. They never filed
Yeah.
it. And so I was like, awesome. And so, so, and so then I
Man.
reached out to the attorney and I was like, so look, so they never filed this, but we really can't wait any longer. Like we need this filed. Can you just go ahead and submit this with the closing docs? And she was like, no. And I was like, awesome. So you can't even file this with the closing docs, even though we have a signed contract right here that says they're agreeing to these terms. And they obviously know that we have our own account. And she was like, no, but you can file it. I was like, oh, cool. And so I just go ahead and submit it immediately. And again, this is like 3 o'clock. And I'm just refreshing like every 15 minutes and it's not recording. It's just sitting there at the county office. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Well,
And
you have
so
a lien release from the other wholesalers already to go?
yeah, I already had it notarized, but they were supposed to file it as the terms of our agreement. They were supposed to get it notarized and file it. But for whatever reason, they just sent us the copy that was notarized and they never filed it. Anyways, at least we had that copy.
They probably didn't know how to do it.
Yeah. And so at least we had that copy. It was my fault. I should have filed it a long time ago, but I just assumed that the closing attorney would file it because that's whatever. And so I filed it at like 3 o'clock, like I said, and I'm just refreshing, and it's just not recording. It's just sitting there. And usually when I send docs, like it's 10, 15 minutes, I get it recorded. But for whatever reason, it's not happening. And so like I think it was literally like 4 o'clock. I finally get this confirmation. I forwarded it to the attorney. I'm like, look, like please can you record? And she's like, yeah, well, Cumberland County is notoriously slow and it's 4 o'clock and they close at 4:30. And I was like, please, like, can we just record this? And so it got recorded. She submitted her package at like 4:10 and it got recorded at 4:20 or something. And so they just sat on my dock for an hour and a half and they recorded hers in 10 minutes. And I was like, oh, like that's why I asked the attorney to file it because they give them more respect, I think. But
Yeah.
either way, long story short, we got it closed right before 4:30. And even with Good Friday, the wires went out like that Thursday, and then the sellers got their funds on that Friday, even though I thought they wouldn't. And so that was great. And so we got it all closed. And then that evening, since we got everything signed, I let her get her stuff out that evening. And so all was well, and we finally closed the deal. So that was
Wow,
awesome.
that's crazy.
Yeah,
So
but
are you never working with that attorney again?
yeah. So this is the attorney that we already decided we're not working with, but this was way
Yeah.
back in January. We opened the
You're
file, and
still with
so
them. Yeah.
yeah, we
Because
just had
that's,
to.
I mean, as we've talked about, we don't want to go deep into the memorandum stuff. Maybe that's another episode. It's probably not an episode. It might be a
Yeah,
part of the episode. But man, like we filed so many memorandums and the attorneys just close right around us all the time.
yeah,
And then you have one that's proven to be not valid and they still won't close. And
yeah,
I know which attorney you're talking about, so I know why that's
yeah.
the case. But that's annoying, man.
It is.
You've proved that, so that cost you 7,500. That attorney cost you $7,500, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah. Wow.
yeah. And so, if I had more time, which is funny, I reached out to this other attorney that I work with often for specific performance, and they said that you can actually like sue for that. Technically, I couldn't, but the owners could sue for that. They could sue the prior wholesaler for clouding their title since they didn't have both signatures.
Uh-huh.
But obviously, that's going to take time and money and stuff. And so, if I had known that from the get-go, I probably would have started that suit in January and just told the seller, like, we'll pay your attorney fees, like, just go ahead and file the suit.
It'd probably be less than $7,500.
Probably be just a couple thousand, yeah.
Yeah.
So if I had known that, and I knew I would have this much time, these months, then I probably would have tried that instead. But yeah, we're still able to make a profit. So just real quick, and then I'll wrap it. The final numbers. Oh, I didn't even share. When we finally got ready to close, the buyer backed out on us, and so that was awesome. And so then we resold it to another buyer, which is $1,500 more. So we got to make a little bit more. And so our end price was 185 to the end buyer, so that would have been 21.5. But again, we had to pay 7,500. So we walked away with 14,000 assignment fee, with a few other expenses for the
So
notaries
that's
and
a lot
stuff.
of work for 14,000.
I know. So
I popped away because I had to grab my charger. My computer's telling me it's going to die.
no, it's all good.
I'm still here.
But but yeah, so sorry to go so long on that, but hopefully there's
Oh,
some.
that's a crazy story with a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Hopefully, people who are listening who haven't dealt with stuff like that, at least it gives you some insight into some of the stuff you're going to run into.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you never run into it. But I'm curious to know, like, if you're listening and you've filed memorandums, do they work in the state you're in if you're not in North Carolina? Because, when we first found out about them, we were like, awesome, we can file a memorandum. We can block anybody else from, trying to go around us, or sellers to try and, cancel on us and go with somebody higher, whatever it is. But we found that they've had uh, very little effect. And
Yeah.
every once in a while, and I think it might be county specific too. I think there's some counties that honor them more than others. But man, I'm just wondering if in other states of the U.S., if you file a memorandum, does it always come up every time somebody tries to close, and is it always an issue? Or does it protect you or not? Because
Yeah,
if
it's
we've
great. That's a
close
great point.
done like 20 or 30 of these a year for the last few years, they're $30 each. That's like whatever, $500-$600 a year we're spending on memorandums.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd be interested to know if anyone has done it and had success, let us know what state you work in. Maybe I'll come work in that state.
Yeah, because we'd save a lot of deals, and we've had so many deals where sellers go around us, or yeah,
Yep.
could be a whole different world.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so that's my deal breakdown, and it was so rocky with the seller, I forgot that the buyer backed out. But the buyer backed out on us a couple weeks before closing, and we were able to resell it for higher, which is always great when that happens. Doesn't always happen, but we got a little bit more money out of it. So
Sometimes your buyer backs out and you're just over a barrel. You're just stuck
yeah,
and starting from zero. Yeah, so
yeah,
that's great. After all the other stuff you went through, that's really
I know.
impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, the buyer was the shining light of this deal. They were all cash, super easy to work with, super friendly, and they loved the fact that Giselle was bilingual because they were Hispanic, and so it was just really nice to work with them, and they really liked working with us, specifically Giselle. So that was great. But yeah, so after our business breakdown and everything, we like to dive into tips, tools, and strategies. We could also maybe combine that with audience questions if we have any of those. But do you want to dive into that, share any tools, tips, and tricks, and then get to any questions that we might have?
Yeah, I didn't write down any tools or tips or anything, so I think the deal stories can probably cover that, and we gave a
Okay.
lot of tips in the hiring thing. But if you have anything, go ahead and jump in on it.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to recap, we mentioned Online Jobs PH, mentioned Upwork, we mentioned Rapid Assistance, we mentioned somewhere.com, and Riva Global was the last one that I mentioned. So those are all hiring resources. You guys can check those out. And yeah, let us know what you think. And if you want us to go in depth in the future on hiring, we can definitely do a follow-up episode.
All right, and then as far as the community tab, let's see what we have here. I'm trying to go back to uh, Enzo Dialer. We got some comments here about other tools. So perfect timing, talking about
Yeah,
tools and tips. This person says text grid has SMS at 0.0035. I may have to give them a try. Currently using REI reply. So text grid is something this person is floating out there as maybe a good texting platform. Uh,
nice.
Enzo Dialer is the best dialer in the market, 35 to 55 live person connections per hour is
Wow.
what this comment says. So I haven't heard of Enzo Dialer, but it's a good follow up to our talking about call tools and Mojo Dialer and the other
Mm-hmm.
dialers you mentioned in a previous episode, Jasper, I guess last episode for the lead. That was from the comment on our lead gen episode. And
Okay.
then we had a question here. Curious to know why you guys have your own companies versus teaming up 50-50 and growing one big company together. You have anything you want to say to that, Jasper?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think we're each kind of going after different things. And so yeah, I think you started going after sub two and land and stuff. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why we never really discussed that. So I don't know.
Yeah, we when we first started, well, Jasper started before me. I'd say that's one factor too, is that Jasper started doing this on his own. And if you listen to there's an episode where I interviewed Jasper about sort of his origin story and the beginning of his business. He did this on his own, and he did it kind of close to the vest and just kept it to himself and just wanted to build something. I think, Jasper, you wanted to build something of your own and you wanted to keep it private because when you're growing something like this, you kind of keep it to yourself. And
Yeah.
so I didn't know a lot about what he was doing until he started closing deals. And then we did look at some flips together because I have a background in carpentry. And we have actually, Jasper, I just found some old videos of you and I looking at those first couple of flip opportunities together, uh,
Nice.
like videos walking through. We could probably post them somewhere just for fun. But
Yeah.
so we did look at a couple flips and we're like, well, maybe this is how we would work together because I had the carpentry skills and Jasper was finding deals and stuff. And we looked at it, but the deals we looked at were just no goes for various reasons. The amount of repairs needed and the price point and all that stuff. And then, as Jasper said, I got into subject to first, and I went off in that direction for a little while, and then I got into vacant land, and he was meanwhile doing just wholesaling houses. And I don't know. I think it's similar for me too. I kind of wanted to find my own way and find what my path was and not just jump into Jasper's thing or, he was doing well. So I wanted to let him be on his track and on his path. So, but it's been really valuable, I think, for both of us too. It's been really valuable. I'll speak for myself. It's been very valuable for me to have this mastermind with Jasper that's turned into a podcast. But for 3 or 4 years now, we've been meeting weekly and discussing our businesses and what's working, what's not working, what our challenges are, what our victories are, all these things. And that's been great to have the two different businesses and see, compare notes. So I guess
Yeah.
that's my more long-winded answer to it, but it's a great question.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we never would combine forces on other things in the future. But right now we have two businesses we both kind of like running, and yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, we do JV deals together and like you're probably the only person I do that with. It's just for me, like I think the main reason, I mean, we never even discussed it, but the main reason for me, like I got started, I worked with a few people JVing when I got started because that's how I learned the business. And a lot of those people were just bugging me nonstop to partner up, and I never wanted to. And to me, it just felt like when I started my own thing, that it was my own thing. And I was really excited about that, really proud of it. And I just
Yeah,
wanted to do my own thing. And
yeah,
so to me, having a partner, full time as opposed to doing JV deals almost feels like I'm working for someone else again. And I don't like that feeling. And so I think that's the reason for me. And, obviously we love each other, we're family, but like I don't know if I would ever want to partner in my business just for that reason. And
yeah,
it's part of why like I only do JV deals with you because you're my family and I love you. But like I don't even like doing JV deals anymore. I just like doing my own deals and my own thing. So I think that's kind of why for me. But
yeah. And I would throw one more thing on top of that too, is just that Jasper and I are both introverts. We both like to get in the zone and work by ourselves and just get stuff done. I'm not speaking out of turn on that with you, right? I mean,
yeah.
and not that you have to define yourself as introvert or extrovert. I mean, there's a scale and a spectrum on that. But when I started my business, I wanted it to be an introvert friendly business for me because I had done a lot of forward facing stuff in my life. I've been, a musician, and I worked in restaurants for years, and I did art shows where I was out in the public. And even when I was a contractor, I was constantly dealing with people in their homes face to face and stuff. And so when I started my business, I wanted to be able to just do stuff from my computer and do deals and have a virtual wholesaling business and have it be optional if I wanted to do interaction with people. And that's a big part of it, for me. And I think maybe that's true for you, Jasper, is like you like just holding up in your office and just grinding and getting stuff done and without
Yeah.
having to, consult with anybody else or, obviously we both have teams, but it's virtual. So when I'm
Yeah.
working, I can say I'm taking a focus block and I'm not going to be available on Slack or email for this chunk of time or whatever, and just do it.
Mhm.
I think that's a
Yeah.
factor for me.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right. I think that might be all the comments. Let me see. I think that was the last one we had on there.
Nice.
That was the last comment we had. So thanks everybody for your comments and for sharing these tools that you're trying out with the community. And always appreciate the questions, and yeah, keep them coming.
Yeah, I just checked out those two things that they shared, text grid and Enzo dialer. They look pretty cool. So, um, for me personally, I'm not going to switch from launch control right now just because it'd be too hard to change right now. But I definitely think that text grid thing looks good. So for anyone listening, if you haven't tried texting, that one looks like a good one to try. It looks like it's very user friendly just from the website. I only looked at it just real quick, but that looks pretty good. And then Enzo dialer, same thing. It looks compelling to me. So
Yeah, I mean, people are constantly improving on these tools, and we've both been doing this for 5, 7 years. So,
yeah.
you know, we know the tools that have been around for a while, but people are, like we just switched to Just Call in our business from smartphone, which is our business dialing system, and
Mhm.
not for volume dialing, but just for our team. But that's brand new. Just Call's maybe not brand new, but it's quite new, and it's got a lot of cool features and a cool interface and AI functioning stuff. And so people are just constantly building new tools. So
Yeah.
thanks for the shares.
Yeah, definitely. So, and along those lines too, if you guys know of any phone providers, like for internal use, I use smartphone, he uses Just Call, but if you know of any other ones, definitely be open to dropping those in the comments and we could review those in the future.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we'll wrap it up here. We like to share typically before signing off, just a book or podcast or anything you might have learned over the past week that was inspiring to you. So if you have anything that you want to share.
Yeah, I've been listening to, well, I'm going to say the name. I've been listening to Alex Hormozy this week some, and I always like listening to his podcast because he just gives no nonsense, straightforward stuff. And then I've been reading the book Multipliers, which Jasper gave me a while ago, and I like started it and then dropped it, and I picked it back up and reading it again. And so the themes in there that it's funny, the themes tie in with our episode main subject of just not only hiring people, but really maximizing the people that you have on your team. Like you could have a team full of B and C players, and you could fire them all and hire 2 A players and have a much better business, right? It's
Yeah.
the bottom line. But and that's, you could, I guess, you could have 5 or 6 B and C players, and have 2 A players replace them all, right?
Mhm.
But the other thing is like really getting to know who you have on your team and what their strengths are. And that goes back to what Jasper was mentioning at the top of Disc Test or Colby or Clifton Strengths or these other personality assessments that help you learn a person's strengths. And in multipliers, they talk about good managers who are multipliers rather than people who are diminishers, just like out for themselves and not really lifting the people around them up. But multipliers that's a skill that they have, is looking into each person on the team and seeing what their gifts and what their strengths are, and supporting them to build on those gifts and strengths and bring more to the table. And then that makes that more fulfilling for that individual too within the team. So that's kind of where my mind is with management right now, just wanting to be more in that space and be really mindful of it, and really support my team to be the best version of themselves and to feel like they're contributing. Because we've talked a little bit about compensation and bonuses and things like that. And what I've learned from some of the reading I've done is that it's much more important for someone to feel recognized and seen and like they're making a contribution, than to get monetary stuff. Like that's not what keeps people there long term, is money. It's more feeling like day to day they're growing as a person, they're contributing, they're building something bigger than themselves, right? And so that's the kind of thing I'm trying to work on, and that's what's coming out of multipliers and listening to Mr. H.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I need to read that book myself, Multipliers. I haven't read that in a while. Um, but yeah, I also listened to Ramsey this week, and it was different for me, the one I listened to, because he interviewed Dave Ramsey, and so
Oh,
I
I
don't.
saw that one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really like that. And I don't think I've heard Hormozy interview too many people. Obviously, he's usually doing like solo episodes. And so I really like that one. I was really inspired by Dave Ramsey on just the way he structured his business and how high level his delegation is. Like he just gives people so much freedom to run with their ideas and just like product launches and stuff like that within his business. And one cool thing he shared is that like he has a lot of VPs. I mean, he has a huge company. I think he said he has 1,500 employees or something crazy like that.
Wow.
And they have a huge campus in Nashville. That's where his office is, and everyone there works in person, so a little bit different, than us. But what he shared is that he has these VPs that they basically have the freedom to do whatever they want, and they are in charge of their own P&L essentially for whatever department they're managing. And I thought that was really cool. And he was like, they obviously need to make sure that it's profitable, and then they're getting paid off the bottom line. And so if we don't make money, they don't make money. And he just basically, as long as we're profitable, he lets them do whatever they want within that department. So I was like, that's so cool. Like just giving
That's
them,
very cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
just giving them all the freedom to run. And I thought that was really cool. And just hearing about some of his failures too, because he's had a bunch of failures, and he mentioned he was trying to launch like a debit card, and they just totally didn't understand the industry, but they were really excited about it, and they started losing like millions on overdraft fees, because when someone overdrafts, the person has to cover that, like his company has to cover that. And so, anyways, definitely turned me off to ever trying to do that type of business. But he said he was like a few $1 million in the hole on that, and he just had to cut it. And it was his idea. So like, it takes some hit to the ego to do that. But he was like, we just have to cut this. Like, this is not working. But he said like he always wants to foster that within his business, and so he leads by example, where he's like, I'm just going to swing for the fences here, but if it doesn't work, I'm going to retract and I'm just going to kill it immediately. Like I'm not like I've shared it in the past, like with my PPC thing, like you don't want to throw good money after bad, and he exampled that, by just cutting his losses there. So,
That
anyways,
that
yeah,
reminds
really
me
like
of,
that podcast. What's that?
I listened to Rich Barton on Tim Ferriss this week too, and he talked about that mentality within Microsoft is how they really encourage people to take big risks, and even if they fail, they still encourage them. So
Mm-hmm.
it just made me think of that. That's the other one I listened to this week.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to find more ways to foster that, in my business, where maybe people have different ideas for like changing our scripts or sales process or anything within our business. I want to give people more freedom to do that. So that's what that inspired me to do. And hopefully I can do that within my own team, and they can bring more ideas. So there's that. And then I started a new book this week called Unreasonable Hospitality. Forgetting the author's name, but it's a really good book so far. I'm a couple chapters in, and he's a high-end chef. That's his background. And so he's just talking about giving everyone just a super bespoke experience, I guess, every time they come into your restaurant. But it applies to any business, of course, but just making people feel, like you said, making people feel seen and heard, and just giving them that amazing experience every time they come in. That's tailored to them. And he shared about how he first had that from a high-end chef. Just real quick, he shared this really cool story. He went to Cornell, and they had this curriculum where it was called guest chefs. And so you're in this class, and every month they bring in a guest chef, and they prepare for basically a week. And then all the students that are in that class make up all the restaurant. And so part of the students are the servers, part of the cooks, part of the management, and they just run a fake restaurant, and they do it for the faculty, and they just learn how to kind of run a restaurant with this high-end chef. And so I thought that was super cool. But that's how
Yeah.
he first like was struck by this experience, when he went to one of those high-end chefs like restaurants, and he just had an amazing experience. And so he turned into his own, Michelin star restaurant, and now he's sharing his experience. So, anyways, I'm only a few chapters in, but it's a really cool book, so I recommend
Yeah, I've
that.
heard of that book, and it's been on my background list too. I've heard it's a good book.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that's about it for this episode. Hope you guys got value out of the hiring piece, and some of the other things we shared. And if you did, just drop your comments below or questions for next time, and we'll be happy to touch on whatever you would like us to touch on. So, yeah. Anything else before we wrap up?
Nope, that's it. Everything is in the description as far as our contact information if you want to reach out. And yeah, thanks for listening.
All right. See you on the next one.